There is a story that lives beneath the story, a current that pulses beneath the surface of scripture, beneath the ink of history's pen, beneath the stone of forgotten temples and the dust of ancient scrolls. It is the voice of the sacred feminine, silenced, shrouded, and sanctified. She whispers from behind the veils of time, not in shouts but in symbols, not in doctrine but in dreams. And though her name has worn many faces, Isis, Inanna, Sophia today, we call her forward through two names most veiled in mystery: Mary Magdalene and Mary, the Mother. In our collective memory, they appear as background figures, one miscast as a sinner redeemed, the other reduced to the quiet Virgin Mother. But what if I told you these portrayals are only the outer garments of a much older, far deeper truth? What if buried beneath the layers of patriarchal revision lies a sacred legacy, one that holds the blueprint for spiritual sovereignty, divine union, and inner alchemy? You see, we live in a world long out of balance, a world intoxicated with domination, separation, and the elevation of mind over heart, conquest over care. And yet, something is stirring. Ancient memories are reawakening. The feminine principle long eclipsed is rising from the ashes like a phoenix with fire in her wings and grace in her gaze. We are not just witnessing history, we are remembering her story. To unveil the sacred feminine is not merely to honor women or restore a gendered archetype. It is to reawaken the forgotten dimension of being that knows how to feel without fear, to create without control, to birth without bondage. And in this sacred remembrance, Mary Magdalene and Mary, Mother of Christ, are not just historical figures, they are initiates, high priestesses, divine mirrors of the soul's ascent and descent. Their legacy is not lost, it is hidden in plain sight, encoded in sacred texts, echoed in Gnostic whispers, etched in the symbols left by ancient mystery schools. Tonight, we begin a journey through their true legacy. We will walk the dusty roads of Galilee not just to remember, but to reclaim. We will decode the mythos, dissolve the distortions, and stand in the presence of the sacred feminine not as an idea but as a living force within you. This is not a lecture, this is an unveiling. A soul initiation disguised as a video, and if something stirs within you, a quiet recognition, a tear that knows without words, a pulse that remembers the temple, then you are not here by accident. You are being summoned back into sacred remembrance. So, if this message resonates, if you feel a call vibrating through your bones that says, "There is more to the story than I've been told," then I invite you to journey deeper with me. Like this video, comment your reflections, and subscribe to continue walking the path of hidden wisdom and spiritual awakening. And above all, stay open. Because what follows is not simply knowledge, it is a transmission. Sanshu. To understand the sacred legacy of Mary Magdalene and Mary the Mother, we must first step outside the confines of religious literalism and enter the temple of symbolic truth. Their stories were never meant to be frozen in time as statues, as dogma, or as secondary figures in a male-dominated drama. No, their essence is fluid, archetypal, alchemical. Their lives, as told in fragments, conceal a divine map, one that leads us back to the lost balance between masculine and feminine, between spirit and matter, between the intellect and the womb of knowing. Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. That was a veil cast over a prophetess to dim her radiant flame. She was an initiate of the inner mysteries, trained in sacred arts, lost to time arts that honored the body as temple, the emotions as compass, and the soul as sovereign. She is the embodiment of the sacred erotic, the Kundalini serpent risen, the mirror to Yeshua's Christ not as follower, but as equal, perhaps even guide. In texts like the Gospel of Mary, we see hints of a deeper reality, where she speaks not from guilt or shame, but from gnosis, from direct, embodied spiritual knowing. She is the lost bride of Christ, not in a romantic sense, but in the ancient esoteric marriage of divine polarities, an alchemical union between Logos and Sophia, solar and lunar, heaven and earth. And Mary, the mother, her story too, is cloaked in layers. She is far more than virgin vessel. She is the archetype of the divine womb, the creatrix, the cosmic matrix through which spirit becomes form. In earlier traditions, she mirrors the great mother goddess, the one who births universes, who holds life and death within her silence. Her immaculate conception, when read esoterically, is not about biological anomaly, but spiritual awakening. It is the soul's capacity to conceive the divine through purity of presence, through the chalice of the receptive heart. She, like Magdalene, holds keys to the feminine path of power, not power over, but power with, the power to midwife transformation. At the center of both Mary's legacy lies the forgotten principle of sacred embodiment. In the Gnostic worldview, salvation was never about escaping the body or ascending into some disembodied heaven. It was about remembering the divine within the body, awakening the soul's memory through direct experience. The sacred feminine is not some external force to be worshipped. She is the living intelligence of life itself, felt in the moon's rhythm, the breath's pulse, the quiet ache of the heart when it senses truth. This is the wisdom mystery schools once guarded the truth that divinity expresses through polarity, that nothing is whole until the masculine and feminine within us are reconciled, not as roles, but as forces. Magdalene and Mary were not passive observers in the life of Christ. They were bearers of the ancient feminine gnosis, initiators of the soul's descent into matter and ascent into light. They remind us that to know God is not to flee the world, but to sanctify it. And herein lies the great tragedy and opportunity of our time. The sacred feminine was exiled not only from religion, but from our inner cosmology. We were taught to fear the dark, to suppress emotion, to distrust intuition. We exalted reason, conquest, hierarchy, but the age of forgetting is ending. The veils are thinning. And the feminine, wild, wise, and holy, is rising again, not to replace the masculine, but to embrace him in balance. This is not about gender, this is about energetic wholeness. The sacred feminine lives in all of us, regardless of form. She speaks through dreams, through silence, through the longing to belong to something ancient and infinite. And she is not just calling us to remember history, she is calling us to restore harmony within ourselves, within our relationships, within the soul of humanity. So now, we've laid the foundation. We've peeled back the first layer of the veil. But what if these figures, Mary Magdalene and Mary, Mother of Christ, were not just historical women, but symbolic doorways? What if their stories concealed deeper codes, universal myths, and spiritual blueprints? 三十. Stories, true stories, do not always wear the garments of fact. They live in symbol, in myth, in the currents of meaning that flow beneath language. To unveil the sacred feminine through Mary Magdalene and Mary the Mother, we must now journey into the mythic layer of their legacy, where truth speaks through symbols, and the soul listens not with ears, but with remembrance. Let us begin with Mary Magdalene. The ancients whispered of her not as fallen, but as risen, risen in frequency, risen in understanding, risen in the sacred role of the Shekinah, the feminine presence of the divine. Some Gnostic texts call her the woman who knew the all. Others speak of her as the companion of the Christ, not merely as partner, but as mirrored flame. In esoteric traditions, this pairing represents something far more ancient than romantic union. It is the sacred hierogamy, the alchemical wedding of soul and spirit. To the untrained eye, these stories seem coded in metaphor, but to the initiate, they reveal a map of ascension. Magdalene is the symbol of the feminine current, the rose of devotion, the descent into shadow, the reclaiming of the body as sacred. Her legacy is hidden in the language of the rose itself, layers unfolding inward, spiraling toward the center. In many ancient mystery schools, the rose was a symbol of divine secrecy and sacred unfolding. Her name became associated with the rose line, an energetic meridian said to run through the earth, through sacred sites in France, through Rennes-le-Château and Vézelay sites of Magdalene veneration, where legend tells us she taught the mysteries of the heart long after the crucifixion. And the crucifixion, too, is more than a moment of death. It is a cosmic initiation. Yeshua and Magdalene, in their esoteric fullness, enact the myth of divine union and sacrifice, of descent into the tomb and re-emergence in light. She is there not just to weep at his death, but to witness it. To hold the frequency of resurrection, she becomes the first witness to the risen Christ, because she herself had already risen inwardly. Her knowing was not through belief, but through gnosis. And what of Mary, the mother? In symbolic terms, she is the womb of the world. Her immaculate conception is not a miracle of biology, it is the soul's blueprint for divine gestation. She receives not through physical union, but through surrender to the Holy Spirit Ruach, the breath, the life force. She is the archetype of receptivity, the silent power of gestation, the stillness from which all things are born. In ancient traditions, she is one with Isis, who births Horus from the body of Osiris. She is one with Sophia, who weeps for the fall of creation and births light from chaos. Together, the two Marys represent the poles of the sacred feminine, the vessel and the flame, the root and the crown, the silent mystery and the speaking oracle. One births the divine into the world, the other births the divine into consciousness. One is the chalice, the other the fire. They form a hidden trinity with Christ, not the Father, Son, and Spirit, but the Mother, Bride, and Logos. There are echoes of this trinity in alchemical art, where the sun and moon are united in the vessel by the androgynous child. In these images, the feminine is not passive, it is the prima materia, the base from which gold is made. Without her, there is no transformation. In sacred geometry, she is the vesica piscis, the womb shape formed when two circles intersect, symbolizing the threshold between worlds. Magdalene and Mary embody this threshold. They are the bridge between seen and unseen, divine and human, form and essence. And the Church, perhaps knowing the power encoded in these symbols, did not erase them but buried them, rewrote them, cloaked them in ritual, in dogma, in silence. But the symbols remained, hidden in cathedral architecture, encoded in the stained glass roses, whispered through the chants of forgotten liturgies. The divine feminine, though exiled, was never destroyed. She waited, as she always does, in the cave, in the belly of the earth, in the sacred bloodlines passed down in silence. That sacred bloodline, sometimes spoken of in whispers, as the lineage of Magdalene, need not be taken literally to be true, for it is not merely a lineage of genetics, but of consciousness, a spiritual inheritance. The inner feminine passed from heart to heart, soul to soul, generation to generation, not in words, but in remembrance. This is the deeper story of Mary Magdalene and Mary the Mother, not only their outer lives, but the inner teachings they carried. They are more than women, they are forces, archetypes, living temples. Within each of us, there is a Magdalene who longs to embody truth without shame. Within each of us, there is a Mary who holds the world in quiet power. Their legacy lives on not in stone, but in soul. Sanshi. It is one thing to contemplate these truths in the sanctified silence of sacred symbols, but another entirely to embody them in the noise and friction of the modern world. The true purpose of spiritual remembrance is not to escape life, but to infuse it, to let the memory of the sacred rewrite the mundane. The question becomes, how do we live the legacy of Mary Magdalene and the Mother Mary here, now, amidst city streets and heartbreak, amidst digital noise and ancient longing. To embody the sacred feminine is to reclaim the parts of ourselves long denied: the intuitive, the emotional, the cyclical, the creative. It is to honor the knowing that comes not through calculation, but through feeling. In a culture that values speed, logic, and outward achievement, Magdalene whispers of the wisdom of slowness, of descending inward, of trusting the sacred timing of the soul. Her teachings ask us to listen again to the body, not as a burden, but as a sacred instrument. Every sensation, every ache, every wave of emotion becomes a teacher, an initiation into deeper presence. In daily life, this might look like choosing depth over performance, like remembering that true power doesn't always roar, it often whispers. It might look like tending to your own inner temple with reverence, creating space for silence, allowing grief to move through without shame, speaking your truth even when your voice trembles, and honoring your pleasure without apology. Magdalene reminds us that there is no sacred without the sensual, no divinity that excludes the rawness of being human. And what of Mary, the mother? Her legacy calls us into stillness, not passivity, but sacred holding. In a world addicted to doing, she is the sacred space of being. She reminds us that to birth anything sacred, an idea, a child, a new self, we must first become the womb. We must hold the frequency of what we wish to see long before it arrives. This is not weakness. This is the fiercest kind of strength, the strength to wait, to trust, to hold faith in the unseen. To live her energy is to nurture without depletion, to create without force, to offer love not as currency but as essence. It is to mother not only children, but possibilities. To look at a broken system, a wounded person, a forgotten dream and cradle it as sacred. And perhaps too, it is to mother ourselves, in all the places we were never taught how. But this sacred embodiment does not mean bypassing reality. It means transmuting it. When you walk with the codes of Magdalene and Mary within you, you begin to see the world differently. Patriarchal structures that once seemed immovable begin to reveal their cracks. Relationships shift as your inner polarity balances. Even your own inner dialogue transforms: less judgment, more compassion; less control, more communion. You may find that your definitions of success begin to change, that you are no longer seduced by the external applause, but instead guided by an internal flame. You may begin to speak differently, move differently, listen differently. You may find yourself drawn to the ancient ways: ritual, prayer, sacred art, healing, touch, not out of nostalgia, but because the soul remembers. And as the soul remembers, it becomes magnetic. Your embodiment of the sacred feminine is not just for you. It is a ripple in the collective. When one woman reclaims her sacred voice, thousands remember they have one. When one man honors the sacred feminine within himself, he heals generations of inherited silence. And when we come together, not in roles, but in resonance, the world begins to shift. This is how Magdalene's legacy lives on, not only through stories told, but through lives transformed, through hearts that burn with truth, through hands that create with care, through bodies that remember they are temples, through souls that no longer seek salvation outside, but realize they were always holy within. This is the alchemy of integration, when the sacred is no longer something we visit, but something we become. Sanshu. We have wandered the inner corridors of myth and memory. We have stood before the veils of history, peeled them back, and glimpsed the hidden light. Now we return not to where we began, but to a deeper octave of understanding. For when we speak of unveiling the sacred feminine, Mary Magdalene, and Mary's lost legacy, we are not merely recovering old truths, we are activating living codes. We are remembering what the soul never forgot. The path of Magdalene is not a doctrine. It is a frequency, a resonance that calls to those who have long felt there was more than they were told, more to the story of Yeshua, more to the role of the feminine, more to who they are. She whispers to the wild-hearted, the mystics, the healers, the rebels. She stirs the ones who have felt misplaced in this world because they carry ancient light in modern bones. And the Mother Mary of the gentle strength, she is the anchor. The deep earth wisdom, the silence that sings. She teaches us that divinity does not always strike like lightning. Sometimes it seeps in like rain, nourishing the roots we forgot we planted. Her presence is the reminder that love is not weak, it is the most enduring power in the cosmos. To live in her frequency is to walk with grace through chaos, to hold light in the darkest places, and to choose gentleness where the world demands hardness. Together, they form the sacred current that is rising again on this planet, not as a return to matriarchy, but as a return to balance, to harmony between the masculine and feminine within each of us. The age of hierarchy, domination, and fragmentation is ending, and those who carry the codes of the sacred feminine, whether born man, woman, or beyond gender, are being called to rise. Not in aggression, but in remembrance. Not in protest, but in embodiment. This is why Magdalene's story was suppressed, not because it lacked power, but because it was power. And now, that power is no longer buried beneath cathedrals or hidden in forbidden gospels. It is awakening in you. Every time you listen to your intuition, every time you honor your emotional truth, every time you create from the depth of your being, you are living her legacy. You are the temple now. You are the sacred vessel. You are the rose unfolding. The call is not to worship Mary Magdalene or the Mother Mary from afar. The call is to become what they embodied, to carry their remembrance into how you speak, how you love, how you stand in your truth. To recognize that the Christed path was never meant to be walked by the masculine alone, but in sacred union, within and without. The lost legacy is not lost, it is awakening in thousands across the world. Many who may never know the name of Magdalene, yet carry her fire. It is a remembering that transcends language, a gnosis that awakens not through teaching, but through resonance. And so, dear soul, if something stirred within you, if a forgotten thread began to hum, honor it. This is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of your embodiment. If this message has awakened something within you, if you feel called to remember more, to reclaim your truth, to walk the path of the sacred feminine in your own way, then I invite you to become part of this movement of remembering. Share your reflections in the comments. Let others know that they are not alone on this path. Like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to this channel for deeper explorations into the mysteries long buried, now being reborn, and share this message with someone whose soul is ready to remember. You are not just watching a video. You are hearing the echo of your own soul's knowing. The rose is unfolding, the sacred flame is rising, and the legacy lives through you.